Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the May 28th work session. At this time, I'd like to ask Commissioner Nickel if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and our invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for another wonderful and beautiful day. Lord, I pray that you be with this Board of Commissioners today as we conduct business for the county. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.
All right, item number 3, a presentation regarding the John Rouse Scholarship Fund.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Campbell Rouse, and I am a rising senior at Harnett Central High School. My dad, John Rouse, was the former Harnett County Health Director for 20 years. As you all know, he unexpectedly passed away in December. With his untimely death, I have learned so much about the impact he had on this community, our county, and even our state. My dad was involved in many different committees, such as the Harnett County Opioid Task Force and State Employees Credit Union Advisory Board. He also had many proud accomplishments, but one of his biggest was the Harnett County Health Department Medical Mobile Unit. He was also the 2009 recipient of the North Carolina Public Health Association Reynolds Award, selected as the 2012 NCALHD Health Director of the Year, and the 2019 recipient of the M. Keith Faring Jr. Community Health Sciences Award from Campbell University. Most recently in April, my mom and I were presented with the Judge Edward H. McCormick Public Service Award from the Rotary Club of Lillington in honor of my dad. After his death, my mom and I wanted to find a way to honor his memory and keep his legacy alive. With the help of the North Carolina Public Health Association and Patrick Brown, the John Rouse Memorial Scholarship Fund was started. My dad loved this community, public health, and Campbell University. With those 3 things in mind, we decided that to be eligible for the scholarship, one must be attending Campbell University while pursuing a degree in public health. Through contributions from individual donors, businesses, organizations, and local fundraisers, we have raised approximately $17,000. Our goal is to endow the scholarship through Campbell University to make a lasting difference in the lives of students and to continue to give back to our community and to keep my dad's memory alive. We had a meeting last week with the Campbell University representative to finalize the details of the scholarship. To endow a scholarship through Campbell University, a minimum of $25,000 is required. As you are finalizing the upcoming budget, I would like you to consider donating the remainder of $8,000 that is needed to complete the endowment process in my dad's memory. Through the continued support of our community, I am excited to establish the John Rouse Scholarship and follow in my dad's footsteps by giving back to this community. I know he would be proud. Thank you all so much for your time and consideration.
Pleasure of the board.
I would like to say I've known John for many years. His heart was into the health care of all the communities in this county. He served us all. He's even been to my house. He even brought materials to my house to give out to the minority communities. He will be missed. He's missed. I make a motion that we, if it's in order, that
Need to put it on
put it on the agenda for next meeting.
a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
There wouldn't be a vote on this, would just be to put it on the next week's agenda.
Need a consensus. Board is willing to put it on there.
Yes, please put it on.
Okay. Put it on. Clerk. Good enough. Item number 4, discuss the Fampo boundary assessment update and a memorandum of understanding, Fayetteville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Timing is impeccable, sir.
Yes, the Fampo was, I apologize. Fampo was supposed to be here today, I think, to represent this, and obviously they did not show up. But basically what they're asking to do is, as you're aware, as a board, they are moving in to take all the area portions of the county that Campo did not take in. So basically the southern half of the county, City of Dunn chose not to do it, but the town of Irwin did. And basically every time they change their limits in areas, they have to have a new memorandum. I'm sorry, I ran up here, so I'm a little out of breath. But every time they do that, they have to have a new memorandum signed and put back in place to do that. So you can see on the map there, everything in the pink. I will point out that there was a study area that you'll see that is not covered, that's just above Irwin. That's a blank. That will have to stay in the RPO. Apparently there's some study model that Campo was supposed to do. Fampo can't do it. And so we'll have to keep that area in the RPO until we can go through another one of these and eventually get that area taken into. So that was kind of picked up at the last moment, that both sides had missed that area, but shouldn't be a real issue. It's not a lot going on there, but we could be able to handle it. Should be able to handle it with no issues. Other thing I would mention too is I think Fampo is going to have to come back because they are changing their the way that their whole working model works for the actual Fampo itself. So they'll be right back in front of you in a couple of months when they work through those issues with the Cumberland County. I'm available for any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What about this area here that's in gray for Dunn?
That is City of Dunn. They're going to stay in the RPO.
They're gonna stay in it?
They decide to stay in the RPO. As you're aware, there are a lot of benefits to being in being in Fampo versus the RPO. A lot more money access. Commissioner Weatherspoon can tell you that firsthand. Same thing with being in Campo. As our county continues to grow and we need more access to transportation funds and doing things that we're not used to doing, like sidewalks in areas and stuff like that, this will give us an opportunity to be able to go after some of those funds that we haven't been able to in a long time.
So you mentioned that, I guess that would be, or the potential would be to reconsider that the next time they looked at expanding or reorganizing. Now, how long will that be?
The Dunn or the little donut hole?
Yeah, the donut hole, yeah.
That's something that, like right now, I think Campo and Fampo were both doing one of these, and I don't have an answer for you on that. But I will certainly.
But it's
that is
something that
we want to clean up. Obviously,
it's not a set time like 5 years, 10 years. It's something that could happen.
It can
in
happen
another
more
year or a couple of years or.
What happened is Campo moved very quick to have their memorandums signed like we're doing here today. And so they had already went through the process when it was figured out that they should have included it in their model, in their transportation model. It gets a little technical with those folks when they have to do that. And so they had already went through the process, and you can tell you how Campo is once we've done it, we're not going back to go through that, because once you make that change, you have to have every municipality and county in your group to have it all re-signed again. So we'll have to wait until they have something that'll come up that would require everybody's signature again, basically go through this process again. And when that happens, it'll be cleaned up at that point. So I don't really have
Right, okay, so I'm assuming that Dunn is holding out for possible inclusion in Campo rather than
Maybe.
be into Fampo.
Maybe so. That could be. That certainly could be. We had, of course, it's not up to us, and obviously Dunn does their own thing. So.
Sure.
Well, what about this gray area for Airway? Are they holding out too, or is it included?
No, Irwin's going, as far as my understanding, Irwin will be, I know they will be part of Fampo.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Consent agenda.
Yeah.
Place it on consent agenda, Madam Clerk. All right. Item number 5, discuss a request to apply for a BJP fiscal year 24 Veterans Treatment Court grant in the amount of $1 million.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners and staff. I'm here before you today to ask, on behalf of the Veterans Treatment Court, permission to apply for this grant that will sustain the court for 4 more years beyond what we already have. It's $1 million over 4 years. And what it's going to do is going to add one new position that we're able to reach veterans in a more efficient manner. What happens when there's, as you're well aware, that their veterans are trying to get in our court from other counties and to get log jammed in their district attorney's office. This person will work those and continue that pipeline, so we'll continue to grow the court and make sure the pipeline is consistent. Also, it'll give us some more early access treatment, and it greatly reduces the chance of overdose and death of those veterans. It'll also continue the funding of one of our case managers, mental health treatment assessments, crisis intervention, also drug testing and training. But probably the one thing that really is new about this, it will allow them to start a new program that'll use medication-assisted treatment, and it'll be readily available to all veterans who have opioid addiction. And this grant will allow the court to do that and to continue on for 4 more years. Okay.
Is it 100% grant?
100% grant, there's no match. Okay, that's a good thing.
Consent agenda?
Wait on the consent agenda. I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have someone on the opioid task?
Do we have
Do
anybody
you
on
have a
the?
representative?
Not currently. We have Mr. Campbell, Zane Campbell, who is not here today. He's going to be he's going to be been invited to be on that board or that task force.
Great, that's a good thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Okay.
We've already, you got it on the consent agenda, Madam Clerk. Item number 6, discuss the revised nonprofit committee bylaws, policies, and funding. Mr. Trout.
Thank you, Chairman. This morning, I wanted to report back to the board related to the comments that were made by Mr. Langley regarding the possibility of a public-private partnership. I've reached out to the North Carolina Community Foundation. They're the organization that currently oversees the funding for the Harnett County Community Foundation. Last year, they gave out a little over $8,000 in grants and had about a $70,000 or more request. Their organization has been providing oversight for providing funding to nonprofits for quite a while. So I contacted the North Carolina Community Foundation about the possibility that they would be an organization that we could partner with, provide funds, and then have them distribute the money to the nonprofit organizations. They thought that they would be able to, but I haven't got a specific answer back from their leadership. So still don't know for sure if that option is going to be available to the board as far as an alternative for providing funding instead of us managing the nonprofit funding, providing it to them. I provided them information as it relates to our requirements, that any money that we were to give to them has to go to a public purpose. And so that would have to be vetted with anyone that they would provide our funds to. And so hopefully we'll get an answer back and determine whether or not that's an option for you to consider. Otherwise, if we wanted to go down the line of a public-private partnership, that would mean trying to set up another organization if we wanted to go that route, which would take some time in order to accomplish.
Mr. Chairman, could I speak?
Absolutely.
I don't understand this. I don't understand what you're doing because you had it set up here. The county was managing. They had a board and all that. So what are you saying? It's not going to be managed by the board here in the county? It will be managed by this organization?
It was simply brought up as an option, and so I'm researching that option in order for the board to be able to make a decision whether they want to go that route or if they want to continue, if they were to give that funding, to have it managed by the board that is set up by the county for nonprofit organizations.
Well, I'm speaking out because I know I will not have no voice. Because you all have basically decide what you're gonna do. Excuse me. The board was set up in the right way, and it was guided by the school, North Carolina School of Government. And we had a person from each district have making decisions of where that money would go. So no district would be left out. So I don't understand the direction that you're going now. Because in the very beginning, you say you're gonna bring it back, and it was gonna be basically centered around our own bylaws and the board here. So that's fine, because I really don't want to serve on it. But I wanted to do this for the people of the county. So it seems to me that you all have rethought it and gonna move in your own direction.
I think he was just giving us an option.
Well, I know what the option is gonna be. I sit on this board, I've been here for 14 years. I know what the option is gonna be. You don't wanna really bring it back. I'm gonna be honest with you. So this is the reason you're doing it this way. I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just being real. I'm just looking at reality. What you're doing. And I'm through with it.
Mr. Trout, if I could ask a question. I think I heard you say they had given out $8,000 in grants last year. Where did that money come?
That comes from money that had been given to their organization in their name and is currently held by the North Carolina Community Foundation. They hold that money, and then each year, based, I believe, on the interest amount that's been generated from the money that they'd received in donations, is then provided out as available funds to be distributed to nonprofit organizations. So they have their own money that they've received in the past.
Okay, so was that money that was given by Harnett County citizens or? was that
I don't know
statewide?
exactly who funded the initial money for that organization. My guess, my assumption would be is that it was primarily Harnett County individuals, but we would have to get with somebody that serves on that board, and or even the foundation, North Carolina Community Foundation, might be able to provide us that information as to where their initial funding came from.
Thank you.
So the county will have no input as to what non-funding organizations get that money. It would be all left up to that board.
Within
That's not right.
within the parameters that we have as a requirement as a county to fund public purpose.
Well, we'll say this one more time. I don't think it's right. I think the county played a valuable role in knowing the organizations and knowing the need of these nonprofit organizations. But I see what you're doing, so it's okay with me. You let this board, I'll accept one, make the decision, and that's the way it is set up. If the nonprofit organization was already set up and had guidelines, in fact, our attorneys draw up the bylaws. So why are you gonna reach out to another organization to do this? Doesn't make any sense.
All right, consensus of the board to put, obviously, put this on for further discussion.
Yeah, I think we certainly need to discuss this further.
Get that, Madam Clerk.
I think we need to hold off on it until we hear back from
Maybe
Yeah.
the next work
the
session.
manager.
Next work session, yes.
Item number 7, discuss the fiscal year 24-25 recommended budget.
Chairman, I'll start while Ms. Honeycutt is working towards the podium. After the last meeting discussing the budget, we looked at the different possibilities that might be able to be utilized in order to provide additional funding to the school district. And so what Ms. Honeycutt has found is information to provide you regarding what the possibilities are, and gives you some examples that maybe would provide insight as to what possible actions could be taken by the board.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners of the Board. So at the request, I have put together a PowerPoint presentation, and to echo what Mr. Trout has just stated, this is just to analyze the data that we have been given and then to provide different options and then the impact of those options. Because I think that this is going to be a much larger picture than we can, within just a few short weeks of being presented this information, be able to make a solid decision moving forward. So I'm going to ask Melissa to drive, because I obviously cannot talk and click at the same time, so I'm just going to talk. All right, so basically, as requested, Board of Education, and I want to slide number 1. I want to kind of go back and give a background information. So the page 2. All right, so that is our reserve fund balance calculation. I kind of want to just bring this back in front of you. So when we closed our books for fiscal year 2023, fund balance was calculated and it was unassigned, and that is the number that will follow Harnett County from now until forever. That is a calculation that is a defined moment in time. When we close our books, everything gets still, and then we know how much our unassigned fund balance is. So as of June 30th, 2023, our unassigned fund balance was 31.12%. And if you will remember, unassigned fund balance is one of the mechanisms that we are judged by. When we go out for the market to borrow debt, our credit rating is based upon our ability to borrow debt, which is based on our unassigned fund balance. And unassigned fund balance is basically, it's not restricted. It is available for appropriation as it comes up. And this is what we would call, I guess, when I refer to that, as kind of like your discretionary fund. So if something comes up during the fiscal year and you need to fund additional funding, this is where you would fund it from. So, and then our fiscal policy requires that at mid-year, I come back before you and take that calculated unassigned fund balance and then look at the fund balance that has been appropriated throughout the year and any projected appropriations of fund balance, and then give you a restated fund balance percentage. So the second half of that slide shows, basically the fund balance that was appropriated to balance our budget for this current year that we're in we used $4.9 million. As of May the 7th, you had appropriated an additional $2.4 million in fund balance, which would bring your restated unassigned to 26.61%. And keep in mind, that percentage is if we stopped our books on May the 7th and closed everything, which means, a lot of grants that we have, we spend the money and then get reimbursed up front. That does not take into account any of that. That does not take into account the additional sales tax that we have left to collect. Basically, if we closed our books at that moment and did not receive any more revenue, our unassigned fund balance would be 26.61%. So I just kind of wanted to, put that back in front of you as we move forward in our discussion. Okay. Okay. All right, so apologies. This is kind of overlaid on top of this. So the information that I'm pulling from, I put it in your package, is a low wealth calculator formula that was provided by DPI. It's several pages long, and I put that in front of you. And I also highlighted in red several of the areas under column 2425 that I will be referring to throughout this presentation. So it's a lot easier for you to see it, because this is a lot of information to go through. I got this form from Andrew Cox, who is the finance officer for the school system, and we have gone through it, looked at it, and analyzed it. And so according to the low wealth calculator, and this is the funding this is how the state calculates the funding that they will give to the schools for the next 24-25 budget year. So as we're going through it, let me take a look at mine. So what they have revealed to us is that the adjusted allotment that they fund to Harnett County Schools for the current year that we're in, 23-24, was $14.2 million. Based on the new information that they have calculated, they are projecting that the adjusted allotment will drop from 14.2 to $8.3 million, which is an allotment deficit of $5.8 million. And so one thing as we go through this sheet, and I'm not going to take the entire presentation to go through it line by line, but what I want to point out to you as you are reading through this is that this formula takes into consideration a lot of assumptions, a lot of data points, and then it compares Harnett County to your state average and to what the other counties are doing. It takes our county property values, our actual and projected, as well as the weighted sales assessment, which then creates an adjusted property tax base, which then is converted based on the state sales tax rate or sales tax distribution. And it has been my experience that, you know, the economists, you know, as we're trying to put our budget together, they come out and they tell us, you know, this is how we feel the economy is going. This is what we kind of feel like your sales tax is going to be. And that's what a lot of units base their sales tax projections and build their budget around. But also you have to approach it with some reality. So if you know that historically we've received maybe 1 to 2 percentage points below their projections, then you kind of have an idea for that feel of how you need to budget. Because you don't, it's kind of like printing checks. You can print checks all day long, but if you don't have anything in the bank, they're worthless. So we always take that information, apply it to how Harnett County functions and what we get in actually get into our bank accounts, and then we move from there. So that's based on how they feel that the sales tax projections are going to go. They also take into account the per capita income. So that is the efforts of the county to improve our economy. So as you as a board move forward to bring jobs in, to get the per capita income, our jobs up, to get industry in here, to give our citizens more opportunity, that ties back into that information as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Our county tax rate. So when we went through our reval, we are required to report what the revenue neutral tax rate would be. We did that, and then when we set the property tax rate, we put it just slightly above. I know that there were a lot of areas that chose not to reduce their tax rate. They kept that up in line with that property value. But Harnett County dropped that tax rate. And so that is one of the reasons that we are faced with the situation we are now of losing this low wealth funding. And in addition, it looks at our county appropriation to the schools. And one of the concerns that I have is that as they are looking at the property tax value of this county, looking at the state average tax rate, they're also looking at the appropriation that we gave to the schools back in 2022. And so I've got a slide, I believe it's your next one maybe, no, it's not, but that's okay, you can stay right there. So one of the slides that I'm going to show you, and I'll kind of refer back to this slide, is that as the county has grown, as we have come through that pandemic, as we have started to set defined funding mechanisms for the different areas of concern, we have started to up our current expense allocations to the schools, as well as borrowing debt to build new schools. And in addition, we have been providing capital outlay and current expense, not capital outlay, but capital maintenance funds as well. And so from my position as the finance officer, one of the things that I have come to you to talk to about today is that if we appropriate fund balance, the impact of the fund balance. And so those are the three options that I have listed up here. And so three of the options are appropriate unassigned fund balance, or B, adjust the tax rate up, or C, a combination of both. And so Melissa, if you'll go to the next slide. So the impact, if we were to take the $5.8 million and make the schools hold the schools harmless for that lost state funding, would take our unassigned fund balance from 26.61% down to 22.08%, or to $36.3 million. The pros of that is that that's an immediate action to make those schools whole, and then we continue on. The cons of that is that it reduces the available reserves that you as a board have to be able to meet if we have a hurricane, if we have any type of catastrophic event in our community. If there is if we lose a major taxpayer, if we have another pandemic, and citizens are not able, they lose their jobs, I mean, we've seen it all now. Well, I won't say that because I don't want to speak anything up, but it just gives you the ability to react so that the consistency of the county operations and the service that we provide to the citizens remains at a level, or you meet those outside issues coming in. An additional con would be that we are using one-time funds for continued operational costs. That is not the intent of unassigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance is like your savings. You only pull that out in case of an emergency. And so that contradicts our best practices that we have tried to establish moving forward. It also, like I stated earlier, limits your ability to respond to unknown challenges, and it also limits your ability to take advantage of opportunities. So, for example, with the interest rate, like it has been over the last few years, we've been able to take that fund balance that we have held and coordinate that with our fiscal year and invest that money so that we're putting that money back into the debt funding for the schools. We're putting that into economic growth, and we're also using that to meet additional challenges that we have, such as, salaries, and I know we're constantly trying to fill vacant positions and attract talent so that we can continue that level of service to our citizens. Okay, Melissa.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a quick question, please?
Okay.
Ms. Honeycutt, so did I hear you say you would not consider the schools losing $5.8 million in emergency?
Well, yes, it is, but what I would say is that, let me clarify my point. So it's not necessarily an emergency, but it is. And I know I just contradicted myself, but yes, I wouldn't say we've lost 5.8 million, let's turn around and give them 5.8 million back. My point is that we need to understand why it was lost, because, is there a way that we can do something different moving forward? I don't want us to just turn around and just write them a check and give it back. That is an option. It certainly is. But why did it happen? I like to understand, why did it happen, and what do we do moving forward to make sure this doesn't happen again? And that's the basis of my presentation today. I apologize.
Understood. I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. However, I would stop short of, if we're going to consider unassigned fund balance like a savings account, which it is, which is discretionary money, that we have to use in case of an emergency. And so I would certainly classify this situation as an emergency situation, not one that can be sustained year after year after year. I understand that. But I would certainly stop short of saying that this is not an emergency.
Well, let me kind of keep on going, and I'll kind of wrap it up.
Well, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It is an emergency. I do agree with him with that. But why did this happen? Tell us exactly why it happened.
And let me finish on. So,
okay.
And just to make sure that people don't misunderstand, it's not that I don't consider that an emergency. Yes, anytime you lose funding that you are accustomed to for sustained and continued operations, that's an issue. Why? I'm thankful that Harnett County is blessed to be able to have the reserves to be able to make them whole, but what price tag is also attached to that? Why did that happen? And what can we do to make sure that we don't have this issue again moving forward? That's why I'm saying, don't just write it out as an emergency and then just not address it. That's kind of where I was headed. So, Melissa, if you can go to the next one. So basically, this slide and the next slide was presented in a prior presentation when we talked about fund balance, about for the county's reserves moving forward, about the potential of raising our unassigned fund balance maximum from 20 to 25%. So I wanted to put that back in front of you just so that you'll have all of this in one package. So those are the next one, Melissa. So that's where, just to give you an idea, and also just to let you know that if we were, again, as I stated, if we were to appropriate out that $5 million, and we closed our books again, our unassigned would drop to the 22. So that doesn't mean that, you know, at the end of the year, if our fund balance continues to stay around 31 after we appropriate 5 million, that's just to let you know that that's a chance.
But the 22 would be within our policy range.
Yes, sir, it would.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so take the
Ms.
next.
Honeycutt, I have the 3 questions, please. If we had left the tax rate at 75, 74 cent, not done anything, is it true or not that we would have probably still been facing this deficit?
Based on some of the calculations that I have seen in this, I don't really know. I don't really think we would have. And so, because one of the, and kind of getting ahead, but that's okay. One of the things that this calculation does do, and I will point your attention to page, it's the 3rd page, I apologize, I did not number it. They took, and I'm looking at method 1, they took our tax rate of 0.591, measured it against the weighted sales assessment, and then they gave us an effective county tax rate of 0.52. When you compare that to the state average of 0.54, that's where we lost that low wealth funding. They compared our 0.52 to a 0.54 for state average. So to say if we had left it up, we would not be in this boat, highly probable, but to be able to tell you to 1,000% certainty, I don't know.
So what happens next year?
I don't know. That's
And
what
my question is, if we put 5.8 million out of general fund, what do we do next year?
Yeah, I think that's the question. What is the plan going forward? We know where we are this year. I don't know there's a lot we can do to
That's correct.
affect that, but what's the plan going forward?
That's correct. So when I was talking about the current county appropriation, they used the 22 appropriation, which we have upped that in excess of 2 million since then. So that's a 2 million increase that we have put in addition to this. So if you were to kind of look at it and say, okay, 5.2, back off the 2 million, we're looking at about a 3. I don't know that that's a way to look at it, but there's a lot of moving points here. So let me kind of move to your next slide, Melissa. All right, so now, just to give you an idea, our current property value for the budget that's proposed is based on $14.6 million of appraised property value. If we were to take the 5.8 and divide that by 1 penny, we would have to increase our tax rate 4 cents to cover that, which when you compare that to the 0.52 restated tax rate compared to the 0.54 of the state average is a little excessive. So that's where I want to, it appears that our tax rate missed it, but not by much, if I'm reading my calculations correctly. Did you need to say something? All right, so anyway, so that would take our rate from 59.1 to 63.3. All right, so I just wanted to say again, I like to understand, what our tax rate would have been if we'd have done this, and I think that is excessive. So go to the next slide.
If we go to 63.3, what happens up to this low wealth calculation for next year?
It looks like we would get it back, but again, without them being able to give us a planning tool, I would not want to stand here and say, let's bump it up 4 cents and do that. I think from my perspective and from my profession, I like to do, let's start with small changes all across, because I don't think that there's going to be one answer to this situation. I really don't.
Have we run these possibilities by the whatever group this is that does this calculation?
No,
Where'd
sir.
they come from anyway?
It came from the Department of Public Instruction, this formula right here.
Would it be possible to have a conversation with them and say what happens if
Yes, sir.
that property tax rate goes?
That's the
Exactly.
conversations that Andrew and I are having right now, digging into this information so that so that as we are analyzing this and being able to talk about it, discuss it with you, you understand what we're looking at, and then we need to understand, because there's some of these numbers that I'm not sure where they got them from. I think they are actually pulling from their budget office, so we need to say, okay, how are you looking at this? If we actually went back, and that's the answer we've not been able to get.
Yeah, and I think that's the information that we must have if we're going to make an informed decision for the future.
Yes, sir.
Rather than just a shot in the dark.
So,
But can I
this-
ask a question? Talking about numbers that don't make sense. Our real property value, 23-24, was $7.6 billion. Is that correct? That's what this sheet shows.
Okay,
Where'd you get that sheet?
It's in your packet.
so other staff had pulled
And then this
information.
year, it jumped to $11 billion. Where'd that $4 billion come from?
Do you remember?
Somebody chopped down their money tree?
Eval.
I haven't looked at those figures, but I can stipulate some of that's the market, even between revals, we're still valuing.
But $4 billion?
I have to look at the numbers, I did not pull those numbers.
The reval.
I mean, if you said 4 million, I might could believe that, but 4 billion,
Right.
that's a stretch.
This is this is a awkward situation for this county to be in. Especially when you're talking about education and you're talking about fund balance and all of that. What if we do increase the rate, the taxes? What guarantee that we don't have to increase them again next year? There is no guarantee.
No, and that's.
What do? We're between a rock and a hard place here.
That is correct, and that is where I think that this is a perfect opportunity to look at everything and to try and create a plan moving forward for the county. So basically, I think it's going to be a combination of taking a look at our tax rate. It's going to be a combination of appropriating reserves. It's going to be a combination of creating some sort of funding mechanism for the school system, so that we not only are providing the current expense that they need, but we're also building schools and we're also providing capital. So, and my purpose today is just to start trying to understand how this has happened,
I understand.
and then all of the options, because now I think everyone understands that you can't just touch one thing without touching lots of other things. And so when you make a decision, you need to look at everything. You know, how is this going to impact it? And then be prepared for the outcome later on. But I will tell you that, if you'll go to the next slide, Melissa. So I apologize that this is kind of hard to read because of the information that I provided. But what I did is I went in and looked at the budget and looked at the budgeted value for the last several fiscal years, indicated the tax rate, and then included the current expense appropriation that the county gives to the schools. So, and one thing that I did want to point out is that in 21, as we were, right in the middle of that pandemic, the county, coming out of it, started to give, we were upping the allocation to the schools, not by a terrible amount, but what we started doing was funding capital outlay and capital maintenance funds. That is money that the county is providing that the county does not get credit for. So we had shifted to capital because we knew about, roofs, HVAC, all of those maintenance, the parking lots, maintenance type items. We funded the door locks, the security systems, trying to control the public coming in. There was a lot of capital spending that went on there. And then I also wanted to show you that if we were to assign or restrict 1 to 2 pennies on the tax rate, what that would look like. And I do know that in some of my classes, years back, there were several units that were trying to fund schools or trying to fund certain special situations, schools being one of them. So they set aside a restricted tax rate. So the property owner would see that tax rate. So even if you don't increase the tax rate, if we were able to take a portion of our tax rate and restrict or assign that to education, that money goes directly to those schools. If you set it aside for debt, or if you set it aside for for the current expense, or for teacher pay, teacher supplement, classified pay, that is also something that is in your at your disposal. So, and I apologize for all, but this is a lot of information to digest.
Well, my heart goes out to you because you got to give it to us. And I think you're doing a great job. It is what it is.
But
I do
see
want to
this-
say
Yes,
this.
ma'am.
What role does all these rooftops being built in this county plays into this too? I mean, the county is going in such a different direction, but we're not going in any direction that brings in any taxes from retail, from job growth, from nothing. I mean, that's what disgusts me. And especially when you sit up here and say, we have done this and we've done that. What have we done? It's sad. It's really sad. And I'm sorry to bring this out to you, and I'm not barring down on you because you are giving us the true facts. And now it takes us receiving the true facts and trying to figure out how do we get out of this mess. Because education is very important to the life of our children. I don't have kids. My kids are grown. None got an education. Don't know what they wouldn't come back to Hunter County for nothing in this world. Because we have nothing to offer them. So I want us sometime to sit down and talk to you. What we all need to, this board. If you're going to sit up here on this board, not for the privilege of sitting here, you need to be sitting here trying to make this county a better place. And we're not moving. That's all I got to say. I'm sorry, but I'm passionate about what's happening to us. And a lot of it is happening in other areas, but I'm only concerned about Hunter County.
So if I read this correctly,
And let me say one more thing. This credibility from the school board, giving us an account of where the money's being spent, what's been done. I've been sitting here for many years. We get more credibility from them now than we ever got.
14.
That is the truth.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So basically, we need some more information to figure out exactly what this formula is. I mean, that's just one of the factors here. I would like the information on the formula, on what's used, so we exactly know where we need to be at. I also have a concern too about the coming years. I mean, I understand what you were saying about the emergency and whatnot, because yeah, we can handle it one time, but this is going to be a recurring thing in the following years if we don't address it. What is going to happen when we build a new school, such as Highland, and we have debt services and new positions and everything that we have to fund? That's something that I'm concerned about, that we need to focus on, take into account in the future as well.
And we're looking at 2 more schools in the immediate future.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And I'm sure not only the cost of the school, we have to buy buses, we have to pay for the additional staff that's not
Yes, sir.
funded by the state. Do we have any idea what that's going to cost? Have y'all looked into that yet?
I'm ready to go away from
I don't know operational
Okay.
cost. I really don't.
I knew you had been gathering a bunch of data. I thought maybe Nancy might have that.
And let me just say that as I was, the question or request that was put to me was, if we appropriate fund balance, what will that do to us? Absolutely nothing, except reduce that ability. And I'm not saying that that's nothing, but you as the board and the prior boards have worked very diligently to creating funding mechanisms, to creating a county to where we anticipate, and there's a reason why we have unassigned fund balance, is that is to be able to address these types of issues. But as I continued to dig further into this, I kept seeing when you look at a formula that's provided by the state, and that's how they determine what they give up, what they give our schools, and the first thing that they look at is our property tax value and our tax rate. It was so obvious to me that that's where this needed to go. We needed to take a look, because if that tax rate, and our ability to try and keep it low for our citizens and to stay as revenue neutral as possible, did we shoot ourselves in the foot? Yes, but it also brought to light a lot of avenues that we can take charge and we can take responsibility. Now, does the state have a responsibility? Absolutely. I'm a taxpayer, just like everyone in this room, and every year I pay my taxes to the state of North Carolina, and I assume that they're going to do the right thing, which you can take that any way you want to. But as I started to develop this PowerPoint presentation, I was a little concerned. I'm not comfortable standing here telling you need to increase the tax rate 4%. But I also need you to understand what I was looking at as well, is that if we had set our tax rate so that this would not have been a factor, hopefully, that's what we were looking at. And I couldn't help but see that what we set it at and what they gave us as our restated was so close. But it tells a huge picture. It really does. And I did not want to bring this to you today, but this is my job. This is what you're paying me to do, is to give you these options. But I think that this is the beginning of a larger conversation, a lot more conversation. And so as I know where you're trying to go with this, we can start digging into more. I could have brought you tons of information, but in the Navy, we had a saying, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, you just baffle them. And that's not what I want to do. I wanted to start with what started all of this. And they are comparing our tax value, and to dig into that. But I do know that, yes, we can put this out. We can, but we need to look at everything moving forward. Again, why did this happen? Is this, do we need more jobs? Do we need more businesses? We need it all. But again, how do we not have this conversation again next year? How do we not have this conversation in the future? What can we do now to start bit by bit? And again, I don't think it's going to be a one fix and then we're done. I think it's going to take procedures and changes in several areas. And then that way you're not talking about a huge hit in one area, you're spreading it around. So
the question I started to ask a while ago, you've given us three options: appropriate unassigned fund balance, adjust property tax rate, or a combination. What other options are there?
Well, that's where I've stopped. I think.
Who's going? If you stop there, why?
Well, who's
who's going to come up with these other options? Who's going to tell us what the other options are?
So to make this presentation to you as the board, so then my job is to make these three presentations to you, and then we take it and we move from there. There's lots of things we could look at. We could look at sales tax. We could look at.
I can tell you, sales tax increase is not going to work, because I've already talked to one of the legislators and he will oppose it. And for a legislator to oppose a local bill, that's death for the local bill.
Yes, sir. But still, that is something that you still have to look at, because it is my due diligence and our due diligence to look at everything. So if you can't if raising the revenue will not get you there, then do you look at cuts? But then who determines the cuts that are made? So, but I will tell you that as we have set aside the debt for the schools. We did that about 5 years ago so that any spend down of the principal and as well as the restricted sales tax that goes in stays in that fund with those schools. So that when you are presented with a request to build a school, you can see if you will have the funding stream. And we grow that very conservatively and then update it with our actual numbers at fiscal year end. So it's a 12-month running balance. The county is putting in addition to the restricted, and I think one of the restricted, it did include a quarter-cent sales tax for Benhaven. The county is putting in right around $7 million in addition to the restricted sales tax that's already there. That's just for the schools that we have listed, that we have today. That does not include Flatwoods or the future high school. So, but the county is spending money. It's just in places that we're not technically getting credit for. But there again, like I said, as you make these decisions or as we develop a plan moving forward, we've also have to be cognizant of how our fund balance stays. If it were to dip a little below, we can explain that as a one-time appropriation to Moody's and Standard & Poor's because they rate us. They look at our financial position every year. They call me about mid-year and ask me, how do I feel it's going? What's our current collection rate? Are our taxes coming in on time? And that's what they use to give us our credit rating, which allows us to borrow money at a much lower rate. But at the same time, no one saw this pandemic coming and no one saw this housing market coming. And I think we're all scrambling to catch up. But basically what I've done is I've just started options. So.
Any more questions?
I would like, if we have two options, and you gave us the two options. No, I don't have any more.
We can woulda, coulda, shoulda this one to death. Would you gather the information that everybody has asked for?
Mm-hmm.
Bring it back to us. Mm-hmm. Okay, if there's nothing else from Ms. Honeycutt, we'll move on to the next item. Review applications for boards and committees.
Did a great job.
Ma'am?
So she did a great job.
Mr. Chairman, I see that I have a application for the Harnett County Public Library Board of Trustees. Make a recommendation to put that for approval on the consent agenda next week.
Okay. Any other? Put it on the consent agenda, Madam Clerk. Dade County Manager's report.
Thank you, Chairman. Today I have one item that I want to discuss with the board. It'll be an item that I'll request I plan to put on the agenda as a new business item at the next meeting due to time sensitivity. The county and the city of Dunn entered into an agreement in 2012 to provide a facility for use of our health department for WIC. They use the rooms to see individuals that are qualified for that funding. And so we have had contact with the city of Dunn. The building that is currently being used, they need for other purposes. They've worked with DUMA, which is the Dunn United Ministerial Association, I think is what it's called. Anyway, they have another building, and they've worked an agreement that would similar access them to provide those services. I don't know if Ainsley wants to provide any other background, or did I cover it okay? Okay. So this is a three-party agreement. The good news is it does not cost the county anything. It is simply an agreement working with the city of Dunn and DUMA to provide space in order to be able to see individuals that qualify for this. Chris?
And then one other thing, so this is an MOU that sets up that framework. Once the renovations are done by DUMA in that building, we would enter into a lease agreement with DUMA for space to be used for free, but there would be a subsequent lease agreement that we had entered into.
So the copy of this agreement will be, the memorandum of understanding will be put in your packet for the next meeting to consider. We're needing to make sure this is done by the end of June, so we wanted to go ahead and add it to the next agenda so that we can then get it
circulated for signatures and have it done by the end of June. That's all I have, Chairman.
Okay. Pleasure of the board. You need it on the consent?
No, we'll put it on as a separate item since it's a new business item and you haven't had a chance to look at the document yet.
All right, Madam Clerk, you got
Yes, sir.
a separate item. All right, Mr. Counselor, do we have a need for a closed session?
No, Chairman.
All right, at this time, the board will recess and reconvene in room 103A for a growth management workshop at, Madam Clerk, you got that at 11 or 10?
It's
Okay, let's say it's 10 o'clock even now, let's say about 10:15.
Right.
growth happens and you're not always prepared for it, but this is an absolutely great time for us to be having this discussion because we are dealing with so much growth. But the biggest thing is because we're going through the comprehensive land use update. Couldn't have called a better time to start having meetings just like this, and I hope we continue to have them even after the plan is adopted. So today, like you said last time, we had a good conversation last time. It showed us some of what we're up against and some of the issues that we're dealing with. Some things were, some things were a little eye-popping, but some things were, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. So we went back, like I said, when you think of the comprehensive land use plan, it's an all-encompassing plan. So there's going to be a whole host of things that the plan's going to have inside of it that we're not going to talk about today. The things that we're going to talk about today are things that we felt like could help us manage the growth, kind of big ticket items and things like that. Understand that the plan is going to have, the jet port. It's going to have affordable housing things and stuff like that. But today's conversation is going to be more geared towards residential growth management options that we think could help us. And then also we're going to turn and talk about the commercial aspect of things. How can we increase our commercial footprint in this county? And one of the bigger ideas that we have to do that. So that's going to be kind of where we're going to come from today. We have folks from Ag Extension here who can offer their input. The tax department went and found some stuff that they thought was beneficial to the conversation. So they're going to have a couple of slides that they're going to mention. And then, like I said, most of it will come from our group. And most of it will come from our team that we have for the comprehensive growth plan, which, of course, you know all of us, Sarah, myself, Jay, and Brad, that's with us. But we also have Jake Petrowski, who's with Stewart, who actually is our lead consultant for the plan as a whole. And we also have Justin Kerner today with City Collective, who's going to talk about that commercial aspect, the village approach, that maybe we've mentioned it through the time, but we'll really open it up today and let you kind of see what that's all about and get your opinion. Understand that this is really the draft. There's nothing written in stone. Please let us know, even if it's after the meeting's over with, say, hey, Mark, I really don't even like this right here, or maybe I do like it, maybe we should expand on it more. We're still in that part of the plan process. As far as the plan itself, I think you should know that we are a little over halfway through with it. We're starting to get to our public, put our draft together, and then we will be going out to the public for their comment on what we've decided after hearing everything from the citizens, from you all as a leadership, and all those different things. And we're starting to get that feedback back, and we're trying to get it to the point where we can take off. So I won't take up a bunch of your time. I will pass it along. The way that we're going to do this today is like the chairman said, we hope that it's very informal, open conversation. If you have questions, please ask us along the way. And you may hear, if I feel like there's something that you all need to know that I know, I may interrupt and say, hey, this is something else. And I would encourage you all to do the same. So I'm going to turn it over to Jake to start with. We'll go from there.
All right. Thanks for having me, y'all. This is a good time to be talking about growth management. And before we jump into ideas and recommendations on growth management, I do want to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from the Comprehensive Plan Survey, because I think it's a really important opportunity to just hear from a broad cross-section of residents and business owners and that sort of thing in Harnett County. And I think you will see that some of the things that you all are concerned about from a growth management standpoint are actually concerns of residents as well. So the survey, we have over 1,000 responses. So that's a really good response rate. It's ran for 3+ months. There's digital version, paper copies. We're still, some paper copies are still trickling in. So it's not completely done yet, but this is kind of results as of, last week sometime. You can see that we have heard from folks that are new here, but also a lot of folks that have been here for a long time. 42% of responses have actually folks that have been here for 20+ years. So that's an interesting tidbit. When we asked, are you concerned about growth, and how concerned are you? 76% of respondents said they are either concerned or very concerned about growth. So you kind of, it is a kind of a big concern from folks. When asked what concerns you, what kinds of impacts concern you about growth, traffic and congestion was number one. School capacity or quality was number two. Utility and infrastructure capacity was number three. And then loss of farmland was number four. So these are the things that this plan needs to address. And this is very closely tied with growth management. When we asked, what do you value most about Harnett County? The big things that came out is the rural nature and natural resources are highly valued. Also, cost of living was number two, which is something that maybe we didn't anticipate, but that is also something that we need to take into account. When we asked what really makes quality residential development in the county, folks said preservation of natural areas and trees was number one priority. Road connectivity, infrastructure, and overall density were kind of top three. So this is something we can directly influence. The policies that we create and have in this plan and the subsequent standards that are employed through zoning can really impact this. We can move the needle on these kind of priorities with folks. So when we get into some draft recommendations related to growth management, these are some of the ideas that we think are kind of high level importance. And this is kind of like a toolbox, right? If you all really like a couple of these and don't really like a couple of these, then we can kind of lean more into those things that you want us to. Or if you want to clarify things, we can do that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these ideas, and also Mark and Justin are going to chime in on these. Agricultural protection, what can we do to do our part to protect agriculture, stem the losses of farmland? We're not going to stop it completely, but what can we do to protect agriculture a little bit more than we're doing now? How can we address residential design and density, and some ideas for doing that? How can we look at our approval processes and how we approve development to get a better result, give you all a little bit more a voice over some larger projects and kind of input into those, and talk about conditional zoning as an option there. We're going to talk about infrastructure planning briefly, but infrastructure is a really key tool to manage growth. So we can't not talk about that. And it's also one of those high priority and concerns of folks taking the survey. We're going to talk local jobs and commercial as a need and a tool to encourage a balanced approach to growth, because it's as much about balance as it is about managing growth in general. And then Justin's going to talk about the idea of the village concept. So agricultural protection first. This map shows present use value properties in kind of light green. You see a lot of them. Those properties are enrolled in the present use value program. They get a tax break in exchange for using their land in agriculture. And that could be timber, or that could be cropland, and horticulture. And then the darker green are the voluntary agricultural districts. Those are areas where there's a collection of working operations that are enrolled in that VAD program. You can see concentrations of those. The red areas are areas where we have sewer. So Harnett Regional Water has sewer kind of within a mile or so of those areas. So you see where some of those areas overlap, where you have sewer, and then you have some working agriculture, and then you have some areas where you don't have sewer. And some of those areas you have water, but maybe it's smaller lines and that sort of thing. So looking at these, kind of where we have infrastructure, where we don't, where there is concentrations of agriculture, one idea is to put together an agricultural protection overlay. This is a tool where we can say in these areas, we want to really prioritize the protection of agriculture. We want to reduce density of allowable residential. In a lot of these areas, you have, R30 zoning, R20 zoning, and in some areas, that the style of development that can happen under that current zoning is not in line or in character of these rural or agricultural areas, and it puts a development pressure on those that is very significant. So reducing density, not taking away the ability to develop land, but just reducing overall density. You can do larger lots or lower overall density, but generally, less than one dwelling per acre would be kind of a big idea in these areas, to say in these areas, let's not encourage dense development. And some of these areas are shown here. And this is area where we don't have a lot of infrastructure yet. And then you have a lot of concentration of working agricultural lands and some natural resources too. By proxy would be kind of generally, preserved a little bit better than they are. Now there's a dozen different ways to do this, right? It could be one zoning district. It could be an overlay that just sits on top of existing zoning. You could employ it in mass in these areas, or it could be a conversation at a district level in this area. Okay, we want to do an agricultural protection overlay. What does that look like? What are the extents of it? That sort of thing. So there's different ways to implement this idea. But in general, we would reduce allowable by right density in some of these areas. We might, when we get into the details of it, we might want to provide a vehicle or some incentive for some small scale low density development. So these minor subdivision, something like that, that's a couple lots. I think the current minor is what, 7, 6, 6. You can do 5 or 6. You could even make it, a little bit like 10 or 12 or something. But they would have to meet a certain level of density and design. Huntersville has done this, and they call it the farmhouse cluster option, where you can have new minor subdivisions. But it has to meet this very low density kind of form. And it's a way to balance property rights and growth management, because this is something that we're going to run into if we roll this out. There's going to be a lot of concern of folks that own property and do want to develop their land eventually. So we don't want to take all their sticks away from the bundle of property rights, because then that really can be an issue legally as well. We want to kind of leave some sticks in the bundle, some options for landowners, because they might not be, if they're farming, they might not be farming forever. They might want to sell their land, but the type of development that goes in here can really change the character and change development pressure. So this is one of those ideas.
And I would add to this too, that this isn't an all-encompassing list. This is areas that make sense. Like Jake said, these areas that we don't have water, sewer. So, and I think the best way to do it versus, I think we take an area that we really want to preserve, something that really makes sense to us, and let's try it in that area. And then we can kind of move from that area to other areas that make sense along the way. So I really like the idea of an overlay to give us a place where we can try out large lots and kind of see if that's what folks want. And it also will go through the public hearing process. So if we go up there or we do it in a certain area, and like Jake said, we find out that, hey, people really don't want this, then we can kind of move and go away from it. So it gives us an opportunity versus trying to come in and say rezoning the entire county, something more with less density. This gives us an opportunity. We can pick and choose places that make sense and kind of go from there. So that's what we really like the idea of this.
And this is the kind of first draft map. So this will evolve before you get the kind of draft plan, but this is an idea that we did take a look at. These are some candidate locations. Couple other things that you can do with or without the overlay is really looking at working farm buffers, so adding a requirement for major subdivisions to install or preserve buffers adjacent to working farmland. this is kind of an ideal condition where you have working agricultural land, and you have a preserved buffer or planted buffer between that and the lots. You see a lot of development in the county that doesn't have this, right? Where it's just lots a lot smaller than the adjacent parcel, and they're right up against it, and that can lead to a lot of conflicts, as I'm sure folks in the ag extension can talk more about. But another idea is the Farmland Preservation Program or Fund. This is something that a few counties in North Carolina have done, but it's utilizing present use value. There's that program that are rolled in program for tax breaks, roll-offs, where land is developed and they roll out of the present use value. They have to pay back taxes that were kind of deferred or excused for a period of time, and or other sources of funds to fund a local farmland preservation program. And this would be mainly voluntary purchase of development rights, that there would be application process where folks want to go, I want to kind of preserve my farm or a portion of it in perpetuity, and they would apply for this local program. And the best programs actually dovetail with state and federal programs, and these local funds can be used for kind of a match of state and federal funds, to make it more attractive, make local farmland preservation more attractive in those state and federal programs, because you have local money now that you're investing in that as well, and there's points for these state and federal programs that you get more points if there is local money involved. So this is something that would be permanent protection of some farmland. Now, this is something that would do some farmland protection every year, but it's not really going to stem the tide of development pressure without a corresponding set of policies or standards that kind of reduces that development pressure in some areas. So that to be said, I think it's a good idea, and I think it's kind of we need to be doing it in a lot of agricultural counties in North Carolina. Like Alamance County is doing it. Johnson's looking at a program, and there's other examples, but it has to be kind of done in tandem with some policy changes. And then there's a number of other recommendations that we've been working with the agricultural extension folks on, and then they can kind of elaborate on it, but also can help with farmland protection, like additional agents, farmland or farmers market support, value-added production support, that sort of thing. So I don't know if y'all want to kind of expand on any of that.
Yeah, since our last meeting, our staff has been meeting together and also been out and spoken with some farmers, and Brian has done a really good job. He's been to a couple of conferences and put together some information. I'd like to show you a copy of this. I don't know that I made enough copies for everyone. I know I got enough for the commissioners. But yeah, one of the things we know that our farming population are getting older, so we've got a lot of farmers coming out of farming, and a lot of new folks looking to get in, and it's not cheap, of course, to get into farming. So I'm going to let Brian, we're not going to go over all of these, but let Brian elaborate on a couple of those and tell you some of the information that he's picked up. So Brian, if you want to. Y'all got it.
I think the big thing is, with all this development going on, the first thing that comes to my mind is just the soil types here in the county. We have some really good farmland, and most of that is open farmland, and we have a lot that has trees on it. And if you go on GIS and you look at those soil types, a lot of times those treed areas, you think you're saving trees, but those trees are on land that's not as productive as our crop growing land. So if there's any way we could go in on those trees, to do part of the development
drainage issues, could be some drainage issues for farms and that kind of thing. So we need to make sure we're putting the roads in right, the infrastructure, all that is really good, because if you talk about the taxes you're gonna get from these new houses, that's great, but this stuff needs to be done correctly, so 10 years down the road, the county isn't replacing streets and isn't replacing the sewer systems, the things that weren't maybe not done correctly. So those are some big things. But I do support the present use value. When most of the land, when it gets developed, is coming out of that present use value. Tax deferment, that person then has to pay 3 years back taxes at the current rate, and then they have to pay for that year as well. So that's money that can be used to support ag preservation. And since it's directly tied to this, I think that was one of my things I had on here. Another big thing that I have on here, talking with some other counties, Orange County has a grant program that they support in their county. And it comes through Article 46 funds, which is adding 0.25% to the sales tax of everything sold in the county. And they end up, I think every year in Orange County with $150,000 that they then distribute as a farm grant to sort of help some of these farms. And I think that's a possible good thing, because you're not really actually raising someone's taxes on their property and that kind of thing. So that may be an option you guys want to consider. But as you look through these, the other thing, the farm loss. Some of the farmers have told me they've lost as much as 400 acres in 1 year. And when you think about row crop farming, it's dependent on the economy of size. You know, you've got to be a certain size to be able to make a profit. And, you know, that's really going to hurt and take out some of our farmers here in the county over time if we keep growing at a tremendous rate. So that's something to think about there as well. We're going to talk with the economic development representative more, because when we got into these, we realized that there's some things we need to talk about economic development wise that we can hopefully do with ag here that involves, you know, agritourism and different industries. We would love to see like a dairy come in here and offer a small micro dairy, do the ice cream, and then have tourist people to come in and support those kind of things here in the county that will help us. Like when we hit the COVID pandemic, we didn't have things locally, and those kind of things worked into this, I think would be really, really good. And this is on some, you can go to the website of some of these places that I'm talking about in that section and see how they work that out. But that's pretty much got it for me. But you know, everything we can do to protect what we have now is very important.
I would just simply add to the residential buffer stuff. I love that. That came from one of our, I've heard it a couple of times through the ag extension folks. One of our board members, I think on our planning board, who also is a farmer, he mentioned it, and he may have circled it through some of you all. But either way, that's one of those no-brainer, easy to do things that we should have said, man, we should have thought of that a long time ago. And I think we're going to try to put that in place sooner rather than later. So that'll be another one of those things that we can do to put in our subdivision standards to try to strengthen those standards and get a better product. So we really like that.
So moving on to residential design and density, there are some things that we can do to manage growth through looking at influencing that. One is improving base standards for our residential zoning districts. And this could be open space requirements, lot size increases, overall gross density caps or maximums, street standards, sidewalks, greenways, and street trees, little things and big things from subdivision design, and then also dimensional standards that increase the base level quality in residential. And that's going to have a side effect of kind of managing growth, those projects that might be marginally profitable. So that's something that we can do regardless of what we do on the agricultural front. And then another thing we can do is consider targeted rezonings to more closely match future land use recommendations. And there's some R20 that dates back to when zoning was first applied in this county, and arguably that application is not really tied to presence of infrastructure or street capacity or water and sewer availability or any of those things that you would want your allowable density tied to. There will be a subset of areas when you look at the future land use map that call for lower density than currently allowed by zoning. So targeted rezonings and areas could be part of this. This could be instead of or in addition to an agricultural protection overlay. So that's something to be said. There's a tie between those things.
Yeah, what Jake's saying too is basically if you're not aware, zoning in this county from 1988, northern half of the county from Cape River above was always had zoning. You didn't have zoning in this county until 2000 for the southern half of this county. So you can see a distinct difference between the two areas if you just ride through them as far as the zoning protection versus not having that. And I can also attest to you that even in Stewart's Creek, which is something that we zoned years later, I think the folks that done it, they gave folks what they wanted to. They gave them the lowest amount just to try to get zoning in place because people were fighting it. So I think there's some cleanup when it comes to what Jake's saying. There's just areas that are just randomly zoned this zoning. But I think what happened was trying to appease the folks at the time to get something in place that there really wasn't no rhyme or reason why we put it in place.
When you guys are coming across these properties and you think they're like, oh, this right here is not conducive to the rest of the area, can you go ahead and mark those and present that to us so we are aware of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's going to be part of how we talk to you about the future land use recommendations in the plan is we're going to talk about the character of different areas and have some recommendations like this is what is appropriate and this is what's not, and the disconnect between our future land use map and our current zoning is something we can highlight. We talk about implementation, and some of those are on that agricultural overlay and some are not, but yeah, we can certainly do that.
I feel like that would clean up a lot of it, right? I mean, good factor.
It would help. I mean, you're always going to have folks that come in and they're trying to get more density or something in a subdivision or something like that. But yeah, it certainly helps you all when you make those decisions, and it helps us too when we bring the recommendation to you. Say, hey, look, this is one of those areas, and you can say, yep, and then you make your decision based on that. So stuff like that too. Real quick too, just on the subdivision standards thing. We've inched up through the years. We had basic subdivision standards. We've got okay subdivision standards when you utilize, but we had to have a carrot. What we're hoping to do now is to make our standard subdivisions be the nicest that you can offer. We believe that that's where we're at as far as the county's concerned, and then the developers at that point they can take it or leave it.
And just follow up on kind of those targeted rezonings. Part of the implementation of this plan is pointing out those areas where there's that disconnect and saying, okay, it's a priority probably to initiate a targeted rezoning in these areas. And you say, well, Jake, that's the down zoning. Isn't that illegal? And down zonings are not illegal if they're done properly. And they're based on a plan, and they're based on an established policy. There has been examples of large-scale zoning changes after comprehensive plans. Again, Huntersville is an example. A couple years ago, they passed a plan and realized that 60% of their jurisdiction allowed a density they were not comfortable with and did not fit the character of the area. So it was a large-scale rezoning. They got taken to court, but it was upheld because they did it in the right order and it was informed by a plan. And that's how things are supposed to be.
Do you have any questions?
Another thing that we want to kind of update is our compatibility development approach employed currently. Right now, you have a base zoning district And then if you do a few things like more open space and better street standards and stuff like that, you can get a smaller lot size. We think it is a good incentive to get better design. But what we want to do is increase just the base standards to have some of those base standards in there already, and then use the compatibility development to really encourage better design overall and conservation design. We asked this question in the survey: which do you prefer? These conventional subdivisions that are typical subdivisions where you have medium-sized lots and limited amount of open space, but it's kind of all lotted out. There's not really a lot of open space. Or a conservation design where you cluster development and protect more open space. And conservation design was preferred 2-to-1 in the survey. So, but what we have right now is this compatibility development option doesn't really get you to that conservation design. It's kind of just like a slightly nicer conventional subdivision. So what we want to do is we want to increase base standards so all of them are kind of nicer subdivisions, but in some areas where there are some environmental resources or we want to provide some flexibility to get to true conservation design, because right now we don't have kind of those higher standards. So we recommend for this compatibility development option or conservation design option increasing open space requirements from 20% to 40% in order to get there. And then, providing some flexibility in lot size and or housing type as the incentive. But right now, we don't have anything that would get you to that true conservation design, and we want to create that option.
The important thing here too is those are both subdivisions. Those both have the same amount of lots. It's just versus the other. So it's just a design type. Yeah, you're giving a smaller lot, but look at all the land that you're preserving, and you're making it available to everybody in the neighborhood, whether it's walking space or open space and different things, so, versus putting it in somebody's lot.
So, that conservation design gets at what people really prefer and really want. They want more, natural open space protection and tree protection, agricultural protection, that sort of thing. But right now, there's not really the incentive to do that. So, adjusting that, and I think we will have more conversation about this. And what are the standards, and but we want to throw this out as an idea. Approval processes. So one thing is change in application requirements related to schools. Our hands are tied a little bit on the school capacity issue because we can't have a true adequate public facilities ordinance or impact fees or concurrency that is allowed elsewhere. Like the state of Florida has a concurrency requirement. You cannot build a subdivision if you don't have school capacity. South Carolina has impact fees. York County, South Carolina, which is just on the south side of Charlotte, across the South Carolina line, initiated impact fees. They're allowed to do so in South Carolina. They did a financial analysis. Every dwelling unit now has to pay a $12,000 impact fee in order to pay for schools. That is the amount that it costs the county every new dwelling unit. We cannot do that. So we have to do other things. We have to get a little bit more creative.
It's kind of strange you mentioned impact. I have talked to our representatives here that represent my county in Raleigh about impact. To me, it never makes sense for us to build all these homes and big developers to come in and develop this county and not apply some kind of impact fee. And we can't change it, because they already done let me know we can't change it unless they go through, it has to go through the legislature. Mm-hmm. But I want you to know it puts this county in a difficult position. It does. With all the growth that we have. And we can't charge impact fee.
It does.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yep.
Concerns me so much that I called more than one time.
And I will keep calling. I think this is not going away. This is a statewide issue that's not going away, right? We can't charge impact fees for schools. And I think we have to work in that framework, right? I think still keep calling them, I think it's a conversation that the state needs to have, legislators need to have long term. But for now, what we want to do is we want to provide information on capacity during legislative approvals, rezonings, and potentially conditional rezonings, as part of the information to be considered. And then another thing we can do is if we do conditional zoning, there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of, if it works at the large development and it's where we need a new school, then a reservation of sites can be part of a conditional zoning approval as a condition. Now, with conditional zoning, I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute, but it has to be approved by both parties. So you all have to be good with it, and the applicant has to be good with it. But in some cases, larger scale development, that can be a good thing to at least have a site for a school in that vicinity. And then on the transportation side, we need to kind of have more transportation requirements. So traffic impact analysis requirements, when that's required, and what comes out of it. The county has taken a proactive step to bring on a consulting engineer to review, major subdivisions and other things. Collector street requirements. In some parts of the county, our current road network is completely insufficient for the amount of development that is already coming, let alone what's coming down the road. So we cannot think about every subdivision as going out on an arterial and putting traffic, every traffic goes out on the same major roadways. We cannot widen those roads to be big enough. We can't pay for it over the next 20, 50 years. So we have to have a network of streets. That means connected collector streets that collect traffic from internal and other subdivisions and move traffic not on the main roads. So really looking at areas where we are seeing growth and where there will be growth in the future, and have a collected or connected street network is really important. Managing access on major roads, and then subdivision standards, making sure those roads are adequate and connected. So those are some things that we're thinking about on the transportation side.
And just real quick too, on these two, one of the things that we realize is we need to share information more with the school board. We need to gather information and make them more aware of these developments are coming your way. Sarah showed us a great application that they required developers to use in Florida, which is where she worked previous to this job. But we were thinking, man, if we just have them give us the information, that way we can pass it along to the school board. You can say, hey, look, this is coming. It's just a sharing information. They started actually sitting on the DRB, which is a good thing, so they see it firsthand like that. When I say they, the school representative. But I think we want to go one step further with our approval processes across the board for developments, and that's kind of making sure that everybody has enough information from the ag extension to tax, that we know going into a development that we're actually looking at all the different issues versus just checking the boxes that we're going through now. So making a more extensive review process. Now you may get a few phone calls from developers saying, hey, Harnett County's slowing us down and all those different things, but at the end of the day, we believe that that's going to get the best development. If we're going to have development, let's get the best development that we can. And you're already aware of the transportation side of things. We're bringing on our consultant and doing that. We're going to implement TIAs and doing all those things. So that's kind of the thought process behind this slide as far as the approval processes are concerned.
And similarly, just more coordination with DOT too. That was part of what you're doing on the transportation side of things. Use that TIA to get signals, get turning lanes, get incremental widenings, and that sort of thing that just kind of makes sense, but it have been hard to get thus far. Conditional zoning. So currently, no conditional zoning process exists in the county. All development decisions are straight rezonings to an established district with established standards, or special use permits, which are a quasi-judicial approval. It's a little bit hard to navigate for kind of your average citizen and even boards. A conditional zoning option can be a good option. It It can limit uses, require site plan approval and review, allow site-specific conditions for approval. So, you know, one of the problems with just straight rezonings is when you rezone that land to a new district, a site plan is not required. So you don't really know what can go on that district. Especially, you've seen it, you know, with some of your controversial rezoning decisions. They want to go to commercial. Well, okay, there's probably a subset of commercial uses that would be appropriate, but you know, you can't, as part of that rezoning, say, well, you can have these, but not. I don't want you to have a tattoo parlor. I don't want you to have a Walmart. You know, a medical office might be okay, or small shops might be okay, or a restaurant might be okay, but not kind of these larger scale, more high impact commercial uses. So that's part of a rezoning. You can say, okay, you can have these uses and only these subset of uses on this property, and that's part of this conditional rezoning process. You can also get kind of a more complicated rezoning where it limits uses, but also has a specific set of standards that are appropriate.
One thing that comes to mind here, if I can interrupt for just a minute, is the customary home occupation in an outbuilding. You know, you're in a neighborhood, you don't want an automotive shop out there, and somebody out there beating banging at 12 o'clock at night. But who cares if it's a beauty salon or somebody does taxes or something along those lines? So you would be able to establish those guidelines for that district like this. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there might be some other ways we could do it through the home occupation too, just having some different tiered approach to home occupation or something. But yes, yeah.
Building inspector, code enforcement officer in Irvine, when I ran into that very scenario.
Yeah.
It was over a lady doing, well, we nicknamed it toenail gig, but she was.
Right.
Toenails, fingernails.
But yeah, I mean, you know, you think about, you know, I think about the Kipling area rezoning that was like 30 acres, want to go to commercial, and it was, it's not a bad site for some kind of commercial, but just opening it up for any kind of commercial that's allowed into that district is what gave people heartburn. And you can have a well-located property, but there's some issues that would make it appropriate, but you can't feel comfortable giving a blanket rezoning, right? So that's the kind of thing that we can use this for. It can encourage more dialogue between applicants, boards, and citizens. The conditional zoning process is a lot more open than a quasi-judicial procedure. Quasi-judicial, you have to have standing, and not everybody can speak, and you know, it's just a little bit more difficult to navigate. Whereas this can be an open dialogue. You can actually, as part of your conditional zoning district, require a community meeting where the applicant has a meeting with local residents and says, this is what we're trying to do. How can we make it better? What can we do to make it, you know, appropriate for this area? And then there's that dialogue, and they have to incorporate some of those ideas in the plan before it even comes to you. So there are some potential cons to this. This is not a silver bullet. I do not suggest you embrace conditional zoning for every rezoning in the county. It can be a longer application process. It can require a longer review, more staff time, more board time. And you know, we have seen places where conditional zoning is just the way you do everything, and it is very difficult to navigate. And very time intensive, staff intensive. So what we would suggest is think about how we use conditional zoning and what we're really trying to address and target, and how can it be used for the right things. And it could be some commercial development, could be larger scale residential development. You know, it could be other things, but we don't want to use it for everything because it can be a crutch and it can be overused. Infrastructure and urban services, this is something that we have to talk about. You can use utilities as a tool for growth management. You kind of already are in a way in past planning efforts. We have identified areas where we have utilities like Neals Creek Basin. You know, there's a big gravity sewer line. So that is where, you know, we wanted growth in the last plan, and it's happened maybe at a scale and a pace that we really didn't anticipate. But it can be a tool for growth management where you don't extend utilities, it is going to be lower density. It's going to be lower growth pressure, and it can be a good thing to not try to serve the world too. You know, the number of pump stations that you have adds to the cost of operating and less efficient, you know, operating costs. But you can use that provision of water and sewer to aid county land use goals. You are doing some really good things. You're helping out Andrew. Harnett Regional Water is helping out Andrew and Irwin to serve things in their jurisdictions. Every new large-scale development that happens inside a city or town is a good thing for y'all. Y'all get the tax benefits, but you don't have to provide them services. And to the degree we can encourage, you know, urban growth to happen in municipalities or around and in places where we have infrastructure, is going to save you costs long-term and operating costs. So that's something that is important. One idea is defining urban services near municipalities or in county areas with you know, infrastructure to say, this is where we want an urban service level to be higher. And then that means if you're going to be locating a development outside of that, you're not going to have the best fire coverage. You're not going to have access to water and sewer. You're not going to have schools or even, you know, parks or that sort of thing in your vicinity. So you have to be okay with that. So it's a policy level decision that we can kind of explore with this plan.
So those are ideas when it comes kind of our residential growth and what we think are some of the big ticket items when it comes to basically residential. But we've heard loud and clear since the beginning of this conversation from you all mostly, but also from our residents that, hey, we need more economic, we need more commercial growth in this county. And so we wanted to go ahead and start floating some of our ideas for that side of the piece of the plan out to you. And we felt like this was a good opportunity to talk about it because it's just not, you know, while we're looking to slow residential growth, we're looking to grow our commercial growth. So we want to come up, wanted to let you in on some of the thoughts and ideas that we have to kind of help do that. Of course, a lot of it falls on economic development as far as the big ticket items, but there's things that we can do locally because every single community meeting that we had, we heard someone say, I want more restaurants, I want more retail, I want more, you know, places that I can take my kids for a recreational standpoint. You know, I'm having to drive up to basically outside the county to get all these things, and, you know, why can't we have it here? And so it's kind of a, you know, which one comes first, and with the houses and stuff, you got to have the rooftops that'll support those businesses coming in. And we have done some things like bringing on retail strategies and things like that to try to help do that. What the folks are doing over in economic development is doing a good job, and probably continuing, you know, the big fight to try to do that, to especially bring more jobs and all the things that come along with it. But we started this process and we said, man, what can we do from a land use standpoint and do something a little unique, something different? Because in Harnett County, we are different in the fact that we do have so much. We have utilities. A lot of counties don't have that, and it's outside, not just in the towns. It's all over the county. On top of that, we also have a whole section of our county in Western Harnett that doesn't have a municipality. It just kind of sits over there with no municipalities because everything's lined up on one side of the county. So we've tried to look at things that we could do to help these issues, so to speak. So so what we'll go through now is the last time we went, go to the police. Yeah. So we met with a couple of groups. We met with tax, and they said, hey, look, we've got some information that has happened, and we think that you all need to know that it ain't all bad when it comes to growth. There's some information we want to bring. So we tried to find out, well, what's the best place to put her slides in and make sure. So the folks from tax are going to go over the next couple of slides, and it'll be more of an informational, and then we'll jump back into our thoughts as far as the plan.
That's me. I think I met you all, Sarah Tyree, Assistant Tax Administrator. So we looked at, after our last meeting, kind of the effects of growth on the tax department's tax base. So we kind of pulled some numbers, and on the left-hand side, you'll see our account breakdown for tax accounts based on the assessed value. So you obviously see 85% is real property. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot, and we have talked about a lot, I know, through one thing that we have seen a lot of growth in, and that's kind of attributed to our account breakdown and workload, and that can be seen in the second chart here. You see that 50% of our accounts are registered motor vehicle accounts. So we've seen, it's just kind of drawing your attention to see that it's not just the real property that we're seeing growth in, and we'll kind of go over that. But while the personal property has a lower amount of our assessed value, it still is a lot of the workload that our office is having to deal with. And then we're also looking at that, as we were talking about economic development, that business personal property, that's going to be all your businesses in the county are reporting their assets that they use for income producing purposes. So as that grows, that will take off some of that percentage as far as what's the tax burden that's on the real property. So that's kind of why we wanted to include some of that information. So on the next slide, we kind of wanted to drill down more on the growth that we're seeing in personal properties so that you can kind of see what that looks like. We looked at in twofold. You look at the increase in the account number. So again, that's looking at the workload increase that we've seen in our office. But then also what is it meant as far as the increase in the assessed value. So as you can tell, there's been over the past 5 years, 2019 to 2024, a rather large increase in our assessed values. A lot of that's attributable to inflation, as many people know. Those market values are going up on those pieces of property. But we've also seen a rather large percentage in the increase of registered motor vehicles and other individual personal property. So that's your mobile homes, your permanent tag trailers, your boats, your planes, things like that. So we're seeing all of that increase along with the real property. And honestly, it's probably increasing even more than the real property just because of the fluid nature of those pieces of property. And then my last slide was just kind of looking at making the correlation between that increase in accounts and our adopted tax rate. So as you all know, we've discussed it a lot. That kind of correlates to having a more balanced tax base. And so having more of those personal property and making sure those are assessed appropriately, it can also affect your real property parcel, the adopted tax rate for those as well. So that's kind of really important as Mark's going to talk about some of the commercial growth ideas that will influence that business personal property. And I think that you'll see it has a really positive effect on that tax base. That's all I have.
Any questions? It's good information. We felt like, maybe if we'd had it last time, but we come back and be like, man, you got to be able to see this, that, you got a lot of growth, but it can actually help out in other ways too. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jake and eventually Justin to kind of wrap us out.
So when we talk about commercial and economic growth, I think it's important to talk about property tax revenue, and then also cost of services varies by land use. That's why it's important to have a balanced approach to development. If we just relied on residential taxes, then we would have to raise residential taxes, right? and it's a good thing. Those trends on the business property tax going up is a good thing because it allows you all to keep residential tax rates low. There's been a lot of cost of services studies in the past that show commercial and industrial development pay in $3 for every dollar they consume in services. Whereas residential, it's a more complex story. In a lot of cases, residential doesn't pay as much as they consume in services. Justin and his team did analysis looking at revenue per acre per year in different types of development. Town center and missing middle housing was really high on those revenue rates on a per acre basis, and large lot single families was lower, and that correlates with those cost of services studies saying, large lot single family can cost more than it provides, depending on location and depending on price point and all that. I mean, if you're $1 million home, you're probably good, but there's a break even point somewhere south of there. It used to be about 250, but that was 15 years ago, whenever the last study was. Now I'm sure it's a little higher. And the one thing that I'll point out before handing it over to Justin, talk more about kind of his analysis and then ideas to kind of address it, is agriculture. There's been a lot of cost of services studied throughout North Carolina, done at the county level, and those show that agriculture is one of those land uses that nets a positive amount in revenue in terms of cost of services. Even with tax breaks, they're putting more money into the kitty than they consume in services. That makes sense.
Cows don't go to school.
Cows don't go to school. You don't have to call the cops on the chickens, you know? Occasionally. But what that means is every acre that we keep in agriculture can be good financial sense for the county, especially when we are provided decisions or trade-offs when we convert agricultural land to lower value residential. Because then the case is clear. We are digging ourselves a hole financially that we have to get out of somehow. So I'll end with that and turn it over to Justin.
Morning, everybody. Just to kind of round out the summary of this slide for everyone to take a look at, we worked with the lovely folks in the tax department and the GIS group to run an analysis on the county and look at it from, you know, the revenue y'all are taking in per acre per development type and the cost that it ultimately puts on the county revenue-wise to operate the county long-term. So what you see on the right is the analysis from the most recent tax year. So this is Harnett County. This is not like an atypical, prototypical place. This is your county. Broken out to what we're calling like primary 5 development types there. So going from left to right, large lot single family, compact single family, missing middle meaning like townhouses, duplexes, quadplexes, the more traditional town planning stuff. Town center adjacent, so this is the kind of walkable street and block pattern next to a downtown, like a town center. And then there's the actual town center proper. It's also important to note that this only looks at property tax, so this does not include, you know, any sales tax or anything like that. You're just looking at the real property. And we wanted to give everybody a snapshot on what this looks like. Not saying one is better or worse, but there are trade-offs when you're thinking about new development over time, what that's going to do for the county economically. So with that in mind, that kind of launched this next big idea for us in the comprehensive plan, which is thinking through what we're proposing as county village districts. So this is the idea that we're going to take, we have the opportunity to take the traditional small town character. So we're not inventing anything new here. This is the basis for the county originally. And then finding selective, very targeted places that county can deploy a small area for this to exist. The character is very complementary. It is part of what the historic fabric of the county has been, but it's also an economic boon for the county so that you can selectively do other development patterns elsewhere without coming at a significant cost. The DNA of a county village district is not super complex. It is what traditional neighborhood development has looked like for hundreds, if not thousands of years. You have the character we just saw in that last slide, but it's a mix of complementary land uses. You know, a variety of housing types. You have strategic amenities, which we've been hearing from residents for a long time that are missing. You have schools, you have green space, and the idea that they're all within approximately 15 minutes of each other. So it could be walkable, it could be bikeable. It's easy to drive to and from the different amenities, and you can have a variety of transit options. So the primary benefits of looking at this, and you'll see a map on the right, is the idea of channeling development. So we know growth is here, it's coming, and finding a way to focus it in a specific place and a specific pattern that is complementary to the county, but also provides that longer term economic development potential and economics for the county itself, and also preserve agriculture, as we heard earlier. These are complementary tools that we can deploy in the comprehensive plan. The second big one is to provide this missing amenity, so we can focus the missing restaurants, the missing kind of goods and services, the kind of missing recreational places. We can focus them into places where these districts can actually occur. And you'll see the map on the right is loosely mapping where amenities do and don't exist today. The third is that that original graph you saw of the different development patterns. It can help strengthen the long-term economics of the county. So you can see the map on the right. The deeper the green, the more positive it is per acre. The deeper in the red, you'll see the more negative it is per acre. I'm not saying that one is bad or one is good. It's just merely a trade-off of the services that y'all provide and ultimately the county you want to be. And this is a loose breakdown of that same kind of character that we saw in the earlier slide. And the last one is to reinforce this kind of small town, rural county character. So it does not have to be adverse to what the county can look and feel like. It's just finding a more productive way to focus that growth into something that's complementary in very select, targeted ways. And so one of the ones that we're looking at as a priority area is the area of Bowie's Creek, where Campbell has graciously had a conversation with us about developing this into to our own county village and evolve that long term. I know that was a lot. Question.
Well, I would add too that this is an opportunity for us. Like I said, we answered the question like we know that we've got all this density in townhomes in a county isn't a popular thing right now. But what we've learned through the affordable housing aspect of this plan is that we got to have some different types of housing that people can afford. Not everybody can afford a single family on a lot in a traditional subdivision in this county. So we want to push areas that you can have townhomes or condos or something that a person who is the fireman or the nurse or the school teacher where they can't afford. And then not only that, they can also be able to go and get those goods that they're looking for right away. I mentioned in the very beginning that, hey, the western part of this county, we don't really have a great identity out there. I know that Commissioner Nickel, we've talked about everything from calling it, renaming 87 to all these different aspects just to try to give an identity to these places. And I think that this concept will allow us to do that. Justin mentioned that we spoke to the folks at Campbell. We just didn't have one conversation. We had probably 2 or 3 conversations with them, and they loved it. They really liked the idea. They realized that, hey, Bowie's Creek isn't a town anymore, and they don't really have aspirations to go and have them to be incorporated. Same thing that you probably have out in Western Harnett. Nobody's dying to incorporate and pay more taxes. But they do want the services in the field, in the urban field, in some areas that come along with being in the town. So we felt like this was something unique, a little out of the box for a county to look at that. And so that's why we wanted to put something like this in place, because like I said, it's going to give us another opportunity to put some different types of housing. It's going to also give us a, place that maybe we can take it to retail strategies, because we floated the idea to them. They said, man, we really like that idea. That's something that we can sell to the retail folks when we try to bring people to these areas. So, for example, like Bowie's Creek is the one that has what we've been saying, probably the best bones, because it's almost a built-in area that's already asking for this right here. You've got Keith Hills, you've got the Campbellton project that's coming up, and then you have what's centered as far as the actual university, and it feels like a little town already there. So we felt like that was a good place to start. There's other areas that make sense also, but that was kind of the one that made the most sense. And so, but they were already, I can remember the tagline from Campbell University. One of the folks over there says, "We love the idea of the town of the village of Bowie's Creek," because I think it gives them that extra identity. It's something that they can market, and it's just one of those things. Same things that I'll say and I'll shut up when we talk about Anderson Creek Club. It has the bones there. It has open land that's available. Once the water and sewer situation gets figured out over there a little bit better, you could actually see that taking off and growing. So why not go ahead and identify that area and give them the opportunity to grow? And then we can use those things like there's bones sitting there waiting for it. We just need to do something to kind of give developers that push, something that we can sell and market it down the road, whether it's us or economic development or whoever.
Well, Mark, you have done a tremendous job with this. First off, I say that along with everybody else that's involved in it. But you've named your own poison. Now we've theorized this and what we need to do. Now you get with Coley and Brent and other staff members here and bring us a plan, put it into play. Where we can say, we want to tweak this just a little bit here, a little bit there. But as a general rule, that's what we're looking for. Not in agreement with us in that.
Yes, we are in agreement.
Absolutely. I actually did not pay you to say that, but you actually teed up the next slide. I appreciate it. Just real quick, just so you know, the last steps of the actual plan itself is we have a steering committee coming up, and I think everybody in the room should know this, that we have a steering committee coming up to draft plan, and then we have a public meeting, and then obviously we'll go through the adoption and implementation of the plan itself. So that's kind of, we gotta get that done first, because this has got all the great ideas that's gonna be in it, so we're gonna knock that out first, but I do want to quickly talk about what our implementation priorities are following the plan. So you all told us loud and clear from the start of this thing that we wanted an overlay on the jetport. Well, that's gonna be put in place, and that's gonna be the first thing that we work on. We're actually going ahead, we're kind of starting that process right now, so we can hopefully get the plan adopted and then come right in 30, 40 days right after that, and then get the jetport overlay put in place, and then that'll be in the books as you asked. The second thing we wanna do, and I hate Commissioner Weatherspoon's not here because I know he's been asking for conditional zoning for a long time, but the very next thing we wanna go to is putting that conditional zoning in place, so you all will have that avenue or give us that vehicle so we get the very best project we can on these different, on these big developments that we have coming in. And then enhanced subdivision regulations. That's where we wanna go ahead and put those buffers in place. Maybe we don't do it all at one time, but we'll do small text amendments along the way that we can go ahead and start putting those in play for the ones that are just, like I said, low-hanging fruit that makes the most sense. And then following that, we'll tackle this agricultural overlay. That could be easy, it could be hard, but that's gonna take a little bit more time to actually create that. So that's kind of our priorities. If your priorities change, you let us know. If we can change that, we can make any of these. Obviously, you guys are driving the ship. So how you wanna handle that, that's how we'll do it. But that's what I'm thinking in my head from what I'm hearing. These are the things that we need to knock out first and foremost with the county. So, like I said, I didn't pay you to tee that up, but you did.
Any more questions for staff?
I have a comment. Mark, I'm glad you mentioned tour of the houses. Simply because I know that we have a need for new teachers to come into this area. Teachers are not coming in this area when they don't, you can't even afford an affordable place for them to stay. And that's why I've been so focused on us trying to start some kind of affordable houses in this county. Majority of the houses that's being built in this county, citizens in this county cannot afford those houses. So we gotta start looking out for our citizens, and especially for our children. So that portion of your presentation really pleases me.
Like I said, there'll be a whole section in the plan that will talk about affordable housing. We're very early in that process.
But at least you're moving.
Brad, you've been mighty quiet down there.
Yeah, I'm learning, man. Getting a lot of information.